Right, good morning ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of Cabinet at Staffordshire County Council today, Wednesday the 11th of December 2024. Item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Mr Bradbury, do we have any apologies?
Good morning, Leader. Just the one apology for today from Keith Flunder.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest in accordance with Standing Order 16. Do I have any declarations of interest? For the record, nobody is indicating. Agenda item 3 is the decision notice of the meeting held on the 20th of November 2024. Can I have your approval to sign that off as a correct record of the meeting? That is approved. Agenda item 4 is the leaders' update. Heading towards Christmas and the New Year is a natural time for reflection. For us, it's also been a time when we're setting the Council's budget. And as we've been working this through, there's no denying that local government faces many challenges in the future. But I've also been reminded of just how much the County Council has accomplished in 2024. Let me give you some figures. And not just the pounds and the pence. This council provides hundreds of vital services every single day. From the day we register the birth of a Staffordshire baby, there's been 2,281 new arrivals so far this year. To supporting the families with arrangements for elderly and nursing care, we are there. 2,281 babies. Absolutely fantastic. One of our key roles is to support our economy and generate better paid jobs. We've been working tirelessly to support businesses to start up and grow, investing millions to unlock sites in Chatterley Valley, one of the biggest business developments in the north of the county for decades, seeing local businesses thrive in our enterprise centres, and supporting more than 300 people to bring their business ideas to life through our Get Started to Grow programme. We know that good roads are vital to a thriving economy, as well as helping people connect with family and friends. So earlier this year, we invested an extra £8 million into fixing more roads. As a result, we filled over 24,000 potholes, completed 21 major structural schemes, and surface-dressed 762 roads covering more than 1.7 million square metres. I can't visualise that, but it's a lot. Elsewhere in our communities, we've seen over 1 million visits to 42 libraries in the past 6 months, many of which are run alongside our excellent community partners. People have made over 1.5 million visits to our 14 household waste recycling centres, recycling more than 36,000 tonnes of waste, which is brilliant. The brand new Staffordshire History Centre opened in November, seeing over 1,200 visitors in the first 3 weeks. And we've begun consultation on how some of the £18 million we've committed to protect and enhance Staffordshire's green spaces should be spent. This year, we've launched 11 family hubs, saw children take part in 50,000 activity sessions as part of our holiday activity and food clubs over the summer, and have seen 9 in 10 parents get a first choice school place for their children. At the same time, on any given day, our social care teams are protecting and supporting thousands of adults and children with the care they need. And all this whilst reducing our carbon emissions by a remarkable 52% since declaring a climate emergency. This is just a snapshot of the work that we do every single day. There is a huge amount to be celebrated and thankful for in our wonderful county. Yes, we are facing some big challenges in the future, especially with the rising cost of services and increasing number of people needing social care support. But as a well-run council, we continue to invest in our county. Not all councils are in this position. I'd like to take this opportunity as the last Cabinet meeting of the year to thank all of our officers, our volunteers and our partners for their continued dedication and hard work. And I'd like to thank Cabinet members and councillors for the hard work that they do. Unseen, sometimes a bit thankless, but you get on with it and deliver for our residents. Thank you to you all. And I'd like to wish you all a very happy Christmas. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I have to take my leave of you due to a prior commitment, and the Deputy Leader, Councillor White, will now take the reins, as they say. So, happy Christmas, Philip.
Thank you very much, Leader. Taking the reins. apt at this time of year. Moving on, agenda item number 5, minutes of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee held on the 27th of November 2024. Together with the leader, the only other Cabinet member present was Councillor Price. So, Councillor Price, would you like to move the minutes, or do you have any comments?
I'd like to move the minutes, but could I also just mention as well on page 16, we talked about the lease of Staffordshire Place 2 to support some of our most vulnerable children in the community, and it shows the good work that this county council is doing to increase spaces and support post-16 children with additional needs. I think it's absolutely phenomenal that that we've done that, and I thought it was remiss of me not to have mentioned it. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. Yes, I think having young people with additional needs learning in the centre of a town such as Stafford, where they can involve themselves in the community, is a really important thing to be able to do, and I'm pleased that this council will be able to facilitate that there. Moving on, item number 6 is Staffordshire Means Back to Business, oral report by the Deputy Leader of the Council, so that's me. As colleagues will know, usually I like to report on our universal credit claimant figures at the start of these updates, but unfortunately those figures won't be published until next week, this month. As colleagues will know, Staffordshire has a really strong record in terms of jobs creation, with much lower levels of unemployment than the regional and the national averages. We do note with concern the recent changes to national insurance contributions for employers. And we will see the effects of that on job creation going forwards. But our long-term trends are very positive compared to the regional and the national. Within that context, one of our key economic priorities is supporting our residents to be able to take advantage of highly paid job opportunities. And a vital aspect of our work in this area is around skills and training. Our key partners in that are our excellent network of colleges and universities across the county. So the first thing I'd like to do today is to offer my congratulations to one of those, Newcastle and Stafford Colleges Group, who've recently retained their outstanding rating from Ofsted across all of their activities. That's 5 years and running now that they have been an outstanding college, which is quite an achievement, and something that we celebrate with them and with the learners who benefit from studying there. That network of skills providers is very much joined together in our new Institute of Technology, also being constructed here in Stafford. And I'm pleased to say that that £22.5 million facility has recently topped out, which marks the structural completion of the building project. And the Institute is now moving on to fit that out. And we're very much looking forward to that being open in due course. Keele University is another core partner in the Institute of Technology, and I would like to take the opportunity to highlight our partnership with them in the Science and Innovation Park at Keele, which is estimated to contribute £75 million to the local economy every year. The park is home to 60 businesses and employs around 1,000 people on site, and it's a really good example of how the County Council works with partners to generate employment opportunities and to meet needs in the market that are not being met by the private sector. I encourage anybody who is interested in setting up a business, particularly with a science and innovation element to it, to consider Keele. It's a really good home for those activities. Now, the Keele University Science and Innovation Park forms part of our 5500 corridor, our key strategic growth corridor within the county, stretching from Crewe across to Leicestershire, near East Midlands Airport. I've updated colleagues in the past on many occasions on our important work regarding this corridor, and there will be more to come on that in the new year as we engage with new government ministers now that they're settled into their portfolios, and with the spring spending review very much in mind. On that topic, it was very positive to see a very strong focus on clusters within the new industrial strategy green paper that the government has recently published. We believe that the 5500 corridor absolutely fits with national priorities, and we will be pushing very hard for that to be recognised and for investment to be made into that corridor, not just in Staffordshire but across its full length. Whilst we're responsible for the residents of Staffordshire, economies don't respect borders, and this is a pan-regional and nationally significant corridor. Now, in addition to our work on large-scale strategic projects, such as the 5500 corridor. We also have a particular focus in Staffordshire on our smaller and medium-sized businesses, and the leader mentioned some of that in his remarks today. Within that, I'm very proud that I was able to bring forward this council's first rural economic strategy in the last couple of years, and I did just want to briefly report back on some of the successes that we have had in terms of operationalising the priorities within that strategy. I know this is another area that's particularly on the minds of many of our businesses, particularly in the farming sector, given challenges that they are now going to face. So let me just highlight some of the work that we are doing in that area. So we've recently launched our Succeed and Grow business support programme, which is geared specifically towards helping rural micro businesses to grow and thrive. In addition to that, we're running Funding Hero events for businesses in rural areas to help them to access external funding, to allow them to make the investments in their businesses that they need to do, but particularly geared towards the needs and challenges of doing that in a rural setting. We're developing pop-up rural hubs within Staffordshire Moorlands as a pilot to be able to offer business support to people who are in hard-to-reach areas, so the business support goes to them rather than them having to travel to access it. We're also appointing a sustainability champion as part of our local visitor economy partnership board, again, to focus on sustainable tourism and to those access issues that we have in some of our more rural areas. And finally, our Project Gigabit programme continues to drive into those areas that currently do not have high-speed broadband access. We've narrowed that down now to a very small percentage of our population, but that last small percentage involves particular hard work and is particularly focused in those sparser rural areas. So there's just a flavour of the work that we're doing in rural communities, with more of that to come next year. And finally, before I take questions, I would just like to mention, as Christmas is upon us, the many wonderful events and activities that we have taking place around the county for people to enjoy. So amongst the big names, there are events taking place at Alton Towers, Drayton Manor Resort and the Snowdome, together with the National Memorial Arboretum, Lichfield Cathedral and Trentham Gardens, who are holding wonderful outside light displays as they have done for the last few years. I should say I was at Trentham a couple of weeks ago for theirs, and it is spectacular. And I'm at the Arboretum next week, and I cannot wait for that. I see it on the skyline in Burton-on-Trent. There's lots of things on social media at the moment about UFOs. And it's actually the light shining up from the Arboretum as part of their display. So wonderful things to do across the whole of the county. And if you're interested in knowing what's in your area, then visit the Enjoy Staffordshire website and you'll find out what there is close to you. And with that, I'll take any questions. Councillor Pert.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. I just wanted to reference your comments in terms of Newcastle and Stafford Colleges Group and their achievement of being rated outstanding based on their latest Ofsted rating, Ofsted inspection. On every level they were rated outstanding, and that's the second time in 5 years. But the interesting thing with Newcastle and Stafford Colleges Group is that they were rated outstanding in terms of their apprentice provision, on their further education provision and their adult education provision. And if you look at those three elements, there isn't a college across the country who is outstanding at all of those three things together. They are the highest T-level deliverer of T-levels in the region. The same is true in terms of apprenticeships. They're a top 5 college in the country, and they've just finished investing £55 million in some of the most modern facilities of any further education college. They play into so many of our different agendas. You know, the last one plays into our town centre regeneration agenda. And in terms of town centre regeneration, they're also moving into town centre accommodation for adult education so that they can drive further advances in adult education. They link into our LSIP, the local skills and improvement priorities of this area. And the interesting thing is, when Ofsted did their voice of students and partners, the response rate was amongst the highest of any Ofsted in the area. I cannot think of anything which tells us very clear, loud and strong and very clearly that this is a top-performing college. And if we want to drive aspiration and development for our communities, the way to do that is through quality educational provision.
Thank you for that, Councillor Pert. Newcastle and Stafford Colleges Group really is an exemplar, and I think you've just highlighted how that's not simply in Staffordshire, where I should say all of our colleges are rated good or above. We have a really strong FE section in this sector in this county. But yes, Newcastle and Stafford Colleges Group is an exemplar for the country and a real source of pride for the county. Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I'd like to be associated with Councillor Pert's comments there relating to the college. All of our town centres, I think, across the county are beneficiaries of regeneration money. There's not many that aren't, and we've seen that, particularly in the town where my division is based, at Newcastle under Lyme. We've seen the regeneration beginning to take off. Anybody that saw Midlands today, yesterday evening, will have seen the piece on the town centre regeneration. Multiple sites coming forward, multiple developers bringing homes, jobs, better living spaces and green spaces within the town centre, which is really good and helps us to move forward on our regeneration proposals. One thing I would say, and shoehorn this in here, obviously any town is based on a reputation that it has, and unfortunately my town has been suffering in the last few years with a reputation of being the smelliest town in the country because of the Wally's Quarry landfill issues. And of course, since we last met, a closure notice has been issued by the Environment Agency. It is being appealed, but I think I'd just like to welcome that and congratulate the community on the work that they put in, and also thank the County Council for standing shoulder to shoulder with the Borough Council and the community on trying to get the A2 Act, lobbying the government, and also taking on this operator through the planning procedures as well that the County Council has. I think it's early days yet, but it's a sort of an early Christmas present, I think, for the people of Newcastle, that we have moved finally to a closure notice. I think when it comes to attracting businesses to the borough, when it comes to raising the profile of the borough as a place to live, work and enjoy, having a stinking landfill on the edge of town is not the image we needed to project, and not one we've been happy projecting the last few years. So I hope this is the start of a journey where we move away from that, and then we see that regeneration in our town through that multi-million pound, £34 million investment by the previous government through levelling up and future high street funds, showing real gains and effects in our town as we face the 21st century, hopefully with a cleaner, fresh air town, but also a town where you can shop, live, work and enjoy your time as well, and we're seeing that coming to fruition now.
So I've been glad to let you shoehorn that in there, I absolutely echo your sentiments. The best Christmas present that people in that part of Newcastle under Lyme could receive is stopping the stink. I am very glad to see that the Environment Agency is finally taking true ownership of that issue, as they rightly should. But I will pay tribute to the work of Newcastle and Lyme Borough Council under your leadership. You unfortunately have really had to be at the tip of the spear of dealing with this issue for your local residents. You shouldn't have had to have been, but we're all glad that work is now showing some results, and we've been pleased to support that work here at the County Council as well. Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Councillor DeVille.
Councillor White, many, many thanks, and thanks for that report. The report really highlights, doesn't it, that Staffordshire is a great place to work, great place to play, and as per my colleague Councillor Pert's comments, a great place to learn. I also was fortunate enough to be at the Trentham light switch on. It was truly spectacular. It compares with anywhere right across the country. And also, of course, if I can just very briefly shoehorn in a great interest of mine, which of course is Staffordshire Moorlands. And we have two tremendous events there, both on our local light railways, at the Foxfield Light Railway and at the Churnick Valley Light Railway. And they have great events right across the year. But particularly leading up to the Christmas period, they are magical events where we've got the Santa Express and the Polar Express. But right across the county, there's a feel-good factor, isn't it, around the county. You know, the work that Councillor Tagg was speaking of in Newcastle, and the regeneration work in towns right across the county. We're at a really good place. And thanks very much for that upbeat report, as always, Deputy Leader.
Thank you very much. I was hoping you would mention the Churnet Valley Light Railway, because not being a very efficient dad, I tried to book tickets for the Santa Express for our, my wife and I, our 4-year-old, and I was far too late. Booked up well in advance, very popular. Yes, lesson learned, but another couple of fantastic attractions for Staffordshire. So thank you very much for those comments, everybody. Are we all content to receive that report? Okay, thank you. Moving on, item number 7 on the agenda, medium-term financial strategy 2025 to 2030. So this is arguably the most important report that we take all year, because this is about how we actually have the means to run the authority. As local authorities, we're mandated to deliver a balanced budget. And we have that encapsulated in our 5-year medium-term financial strategy. This is a hot topic around the country at the moment, and has been for the last few years, as we've seen many councils are struggling with their financial stability. I'm pleased to say that in Staffordshire, because of decisions that we've taken over many years, and often difficult decisions, we are in a strong financial position compared to the local authority sector. That is not to underplay the huge challenges that we face, along with other councils, where we do need government to address some of the responsibilities they place upon us without the finance to match. But overall in Staffordshire, the picture that we have is one where we're able to run a stable council and deliver the things that matter to people, such as investment into improving our roads, into our libraries, into job creation and economic development, and many other things beyond. So a very important piece of work. Hopefully, without having spiked his cannons too much in terms of his introduction, I'll hand over to our Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry, to deliver the report.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Much appreciated. So, this is not our budget. We're going to come back in January with a recommendation for the budget, which will be approved by Council in February. So we'll come back with a refresh and a sense when we know the final figures from the financial settlement later this month. We'll come back with the budget and the implications as they may be for the medium-term financial strategy. As you say, this is a report about a plan. It's a report about a 5-year plan, which we're required to do, that looks at what our finances are likely to be like over that period, including things like the risks that we face, the pressures that we face in terms of our service pressures, demographic pressures, etc. Economic factors such as inflation, interest rates, etc. And they can vary across the organisation in terms of service pressures or general CPI pressures. So we need to bring all that together in terms of bringing together everything we know so that we've got something to work to. And this really is our resource plan for our corporate plan. So the Council approves the corporate plan. You as Cabinet have to deliver that corporate plan, and this is the resource plan that goes with it. And it's good to see the alignment that we've got between this and our corporate plan, and particularly when we monitor our corporate plan on a quarterly basis, of seeing how we can we manage our finances well, we have good budgetary control, etc. And therefore that suggests, that our medium-term financial planning is fairly solid. That might be the easy bit, arguably, and I'm far enough away from our Director of Finance not to be smacked. That might be the easy bit, and that is we've got the numbers on the paper. The hard bit is delivering it, as always. You've got a plan which appears to be, the right plan. It works, it's balanced. We've got a budget, our medium-term plan that's balanced for 3 years. We have an ambition to push that out to 4 years and into 5 years eventually. But it depends on lots of things happening, doesn't it? It depends on unknown unknowns coming up over the hill. It depends on government policy and attitudes towards it. It depends on possibly a review of local government finance. It depends on what might happen to adult social care in terms of how that is perceived to be needing additional finance. It depends on what the government does about SEND funding, etc. So there there are some issues around here, and we've identified and we've listed in the report those risks which are prevalent, because we want to make sure that we're aware of them. As the leader says, doing the hard things early is what you need to do in order to have a stable and sustainable budget. But you've got to be aware of those things in order to meet them and wrestle them to the ground and deal with them. So what we do is highlight all of those risks, identify those risks, understand them, and have a strategy to deal with them. And that's a key part of your financial planning as a council, as a cabinet. We've brought all of those things together. The appendices in this report highlight all of those pressures and new pressures that all of our service areas are going through, and also the additional risks that those areas face. And coupled with that, what additional innovations, transformations, straightforward, everyday savings can be made in those areas in order to bring down those risks and pressures and those additional costs in those service areas, to bring us down to those net additional investments that we may need to make in those areas. We've sound and stable reserves, over 50 million general reserve. We have used some reserves in the current year, and we plan to use some in the future parts of the MTFS. They're not underwriting overspending or planned overspending. They are targeted reserves which we've set aside in order for us to targetedly implement at the right time. We have reserves sitting there, and at the right time we pull the trigger, just as we did in the Q2 when we decided that was the right point to bring in our social care reserve, which then allowed us to be in a balanced position at Q2. And it's the appropriate use and timely use of reserves and targeted use of reserves that I think is the deftness of our financial management under the leadership of our Director of Finance. It's doing the right thing at the right time that's really valid here, and I think that we've demonstrated that. So this is not about, oh my goodness, we've got a deficit, let's draw on the reserves. That is not in our plan, our strategy. Targeted only, planned only, calm and timely. So I wanted to nail that in a sense, because there is no kind of general kind of just lop some reserves in to get us through that, because those councils that are in the position where they're having to draw on reserves in order to balance their books, everyone knows that that is not the way to do it. That's using your credit card to pay your living costs, as it were. I wanted to raise also the kind of real significance of the direct schools grant and the deficit that's producing, not just in this council, but across the country, in any council that's got any responsibility for special educational needs and disability. There are two factors to it for us. Current year, we're going to be looking at £50 million deficit just on that account, which sits in a sense on our books, but is not necessarily part of our revenue budget. It sits there as something that's staring at us as a debt. In a sense, I'd like to say this is the government's debt, not Staffordshire taxpayers' debt, because they've just simply allowed this to happen, successive governments, that is. But I don't see any signs from the current government that they have much appetite to do anything about it. There's £1 billion in the autumn budget, which frankly in Staffordshire equates to about £1 million, and that doesn't, 4 million, I'm told, sorry, forgive me, which 1 million or 4 million does not touch the sides of a £50 million deficit rising to possibly 70 million in the not too distant future. So that's an area of risk that we need to deal with. A couple to that is the pressure around what's known as send transport, that increasing demand upon send, and the number of children that we have to move around the county puts considerable pressure on the budget as well that we need to do something about. So all in all, Joe, Dr. Lee, whilst I've, I think, outlined some of the risks, some of the pressures, but some of the joy in the sense that we have, I think, a sensible balanced budget here, a medium-term plan. I think this is a sensible plan. I think it's achievable, but we have got to deliver it. So the job isn't done when we approve this morning. That's when we start the work in delivering it. And really, it's the responsibility of you, my colleagues, to deliver this. I am simply your servant to deliver you that. You, my colleagues, have to damn well do it. So we'll be working hard together on achieving these balances and achieving this plan. But I'm grateful to the Director of Finance and his team and the rest of the corporate officers in this council and their teams for bringing this together. I think it's a really remarkable achievement, and I commend it to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Comprehensive report. Okay, I have some speakers. So, Councillor Sutton.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parry, for that. I think that's it's an excellent report. I think it would be remiss not to mention that one of the factors behind us having a balanced budget going forward now, unlike many other local authorities, is the hard work that this administration has not only done over the last 4 years, but over the last almost 16 years in making sure that the right decisions were made at the right time, so that we are in this sort of position now. And in relation to children and families, there are pressures in there, but we will continue to work to ensure that the whole system approach that we have adopted around districts continues, so that children in our care get the best possible outcomes that they can, but ensure that where it's right to do so, that children are able to have the support to stay at home and don't end up in the care system where their outcomes are nowhere near as good as when we've been able to work with those families and keep them in a loving home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Councillor DeVille.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. White, and thank you, Mr. Parry. Mr. Parry, that was an excellent report, and Mr. Parry, you will never be our servant. Cabinet colleagues will know that we've put in a concerted effort this year into fixing more roads. Our approach really started as a recovery plan following the awful winter that we had last year. But this real sense of urgency, and particularly the priority that we've given to areas that are most important to us all, is something that we carry on. That's now almost the day job. And I'm delighted to see, Mr. Parry, in this report that a further additional investment into our highways has been given for in next year's budget. We can only invest, colleagues, we can only invest these additional funds because we are a well-run council. We spend our money very wisely, and we spend our money in exactly the right areas. But I think crucially, it's not all about spending money and additional investment. This year, through the recovery plan and through the transformation of highways, I'm delighted that we've also increased our productivity in all areas by 20%. So it's not all about investing additional money, it's how we spend it. Within the highways operation, we're even looking at long-term planning with regards to our future highways works. So we're really working hard to be more proactive and a bit less reactive. And I think that's really, really important. But what we need to really successfully plan ahead, Chairman, is certainty and long-term funding, and the certainty of that funding from central government. The government recently announced an additional £500 million to repair roads across the UK. This is great, but we obviously wait for the detail on how that affects us in Staffordshire. I think importantly, we'll continue to lobby our government, this government and our Staffordshire MPs to secure funding that the previous government promised following the cancellation of HS2 Phase 2A. And I think, Chairman, that we'll all agree that any funds due to the cancellation of Phase 2 of HS2 would be much better spent on our infrastructure, on our local roads in Staffordshire, which everyone uses. Not everyone uses the train from Manchester, Stafford, Stoke to London, but every Staffordshire resident uses our Staffordshire roads. It's an excellent report, Councillor Parry. Very many thanks, and I'm delighted to support the report.
Thank you, Councillor DeVille. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Price.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I'd just like to put my positive comments on record as well, to say I cannot think of another local authority in the area that has been so prudent over the years that we are able to invest £18 million into our countryside estate, which includes Cannock Chase and Chasewater, as well as the Staffordshire Way, which is something that's very, very important to members of the public here in Staffordshire. Not only that, we're also able to invest into our libraries. As you know, we've refurbished Newcastle Library in the not too distant past, as well as Lichfield. We've recently refurbished Tamworth and Burton, which is almost our flagship library. And as you know, Deputy Leader, it's a huge success, fantastic. And we've got Wombourne, and we've done Codsall as well. And we've got Wombourne and the Nicholson Institute in Leek also in the offing. So the only way we've been able to do this is by being as sensible as we have been. And I'm eternally grateful to my servant, Councillor Parry, for everything that he's done and will continue to do going forward, particularly with my portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Price.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader, and thank you, Councillor Parry, as well, for what is an excellent MTFS. And we are in a very fortunate position with this. Just wanted to reinforce some of the points that you mentioned around the high needs block, although it is not our debt as such, and therefore should not, in theory, impact on the MTFS. Of course, that cumulative debt will continue to do so, which is a massive concern for us. There seems to be at the moment, and we have mentioned consecutive governments, but the feeling I get from our current government at the moment is there is a fear of how this could be tackled, because we not only require that additional funding, of which we've only had a quarter of what's actually required just to continue with the service that we have. We need policy change as well, and that's been well rehearsed in meetings that we've had over the past 12 months, but certainly we need a proper policy change to support our most vulnerable children within the county, and Staffordshire does a very good job at supporting our most vulnerable children. But it's very difficult when you have a significant increase in educational healthcare plans, and we're over the 8,500 and still climbing. It's good to see that the transport team has managed to keep the Send Transport within budget, but going forward that will continue to be very, very difficult for us to achieve. And we cannot continue to accumulate debt as well to the degree that we are. We have a deficit management plan which is mitigating some of that debt going forward, and the overhaul and the work that we've done around Send transformation is certainly delivering for our children, but there is much more that we need to do, and we've got to get the finances around that under control. So if it continues past the statutory override, we could be looking at a potential debt of over £150 million. We're not alone. Most authorities are in a very similar position, in fact, worse in some cases. So it is something that I'm mindful of, and I feel it's important that I raise it at every meeting so that our MPs particularly will take note of this, and I know they've met with the leader this week to get a better understanding of our position so that they can lobby government to make sure that true reform is put in place to tackle what is a failing system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. Thank you, colleagues, for all of your contributions. I really meant it when I said that, in my view, arguably this is the most important report we take each year because of the long-term nature of the activities that we carry out. Our budget each year sets out how we will spend our taxpayers' money here in the county, but this is the document that gives us that long-term view. And without it, and without the actions that we take as a result of that long-term view and the risks in particular that we identify and acting early on those, we would be potentially in a similar position to many other councils around the country. It is our great strength here in Staffordshire. I just want to return to a couple of the points that colleagues have highlighted, because I think they are the key risks that are flashing on the dashboard at the moment. Adult social care is the long-term risk, where we need reform of the system as our population ages. We have more people living longer with serious health concerns. The government has indicated that they are planning on delivering reform in that area, and that is a good thing. Regarding our roads, it really stands out to me, Councillor DeVille, that the government announced £500 million of additional funding for roads in the budget, but Network North had promised Staffordshire on its own, not far off that figure, over the next decade to repair our roads. And that is a, I believe our roads are worth about £6 billion, which is quite a large figure, isn't it? And that's £6 billion of liability if we don't receive the funding to keep them in a good condition. So we are working very hard, and your key point, very efficiently, with productivity improvements to improve those roads, but we need government to provide the funding to pay for the workforce and to pay for the materials and the equipment to do that job to the extent that our residents expect. And then flashing red on that dashboard is special educational needs. And this is something that in these reports over many years now, we've been highlighting it as it's gone from being whatever it would be before, an amber to a red to a very bright red now, and the same in every council around the country. I know that if the leader was here, he would have reported back that the meeting with our MPs was particularly useful for them. They went away from that meeting, I know, very clear that this is an issue that government needs to grasp. And I expect that we will hear more from our MPs in terms of pushing that case in government. We need funding immediately to deal with the deficit that has been built up due to the legislative system that we operate under at the moment, the statutory obligations we have, but we need reform as well. And that is the essential thing that we require. With that, back to you, Councillor Parry, to read the recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Before I do, just to respond to a couple of the comments, because I think it's really interesting, and picking up the points you make, Deputy Leader, we need system reform in so many areas, don't we? Not just in adult social care, where there have been sort of attempts on and off the table. We need system reform in SEND. We need system reform in local government finance, which has been on the cards. We need system reform in the way business rates are utilised, etc. And here we are talking about a 5-year plan when we only get 1-year settlements from government. And whilst it's not a massive figure, it is a balancing figure for us. It is an important figure in terms of what those income strands, income channels are. So we need reform there too. We need reform to have a bigger piece of road to run on. And it's also interesting that colleagues, my paymasters appears, that colleagues have highlighted all of those things that we've been able to do by finding some headroom in our budget planning for extending the highways investment at least by another year, at the same level for at least another year, to allow us to complete the job that we started last year and to make sure that we've got an adequacy in our network. The fact that we've been able to invest more in children transformation, the fact we've been able to invest more in creating jobs and infrastructure for the economy for creating jobs, the fact we've been able to invest in things that give people, to improve neighbourhoods, quality of life, libraries, places to go, things to do, etc. All of those things says to me, and I think it's part of what we do here as a well-run council, in that we're not in this just to survive, we're in this to thrive. We want our county to be a place where we can be proud of it because we are finding that capacity to invest in the things which mean the most to people. As Councillor DeVille says, you know, roads is the one kind of part of the thing that we do that everybody uses. And so we want to make sure that we've done the best job we possibly can do. And we're investing significant amounts more than the government are providing on top of all that to be able to do those things. So really reinforcing the fact that this is, you know, a positive place that we've built and moving forward. So on behalf of the leader and myself, I'd like to read the recommendations. The recommendations are that in respect to the medium-term financial strategy 2025-2030, a Cabinet consider the updates to the financial plans as set out in this report, including the potential use of reserves to balance the MTFS period and risks associated with that. B, endorse the new savings as well as the commitment to continue to deliver the previously approved cost reductions as set out in our appendices 2A to 2E. C, receive a further report in January to recommend a revenue budget, medium-term financial strategy and council tax to full council in February. And D, ask the Corporate Review Committee to scrutinise the proposed pressures and cost reduction options against the principles of a good and balanced budget. And I must say, Chair, I'd like to, at that point also, add my thanks to the Corporate Review Committee and the MTFS Working Group for their tremendous work again this year in making sure that we have robust challenge and scrutiny of the process and of the budget itself. Thank you, Chair. I move those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Colleagues, you've heard the recommendations. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8, Staffordshire Housing and Care Strategy 2024 to 2029. So this is another very important report. It relates to our joint strategy agreed with our district and borough partners. That's a report that's been endorsed through our leaders board, where we cooperate with the leaders of our other district and borough councillors, together with Stoke-on-Trent City Council, although they are not pertinent to this report. And it's particularly important in terms of fulfilling the needs of our recipients of adult social care, so they can live fulfilling and independent lives. With that, I'll hand over to Councillor Pert to do the detail.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. And I rather like Mr Parry's earlier comments. It felt like a Christmas message he was giving in part. And just picking up that Christmas theme, and we can all think of, you know, carols round the Christmas tree, Christmas films, presents under the Christmas tree. But Christmas is a time for holidays. It's a time for family. It's a time for celebration. It's a time where we create memories and share with other people. But all of those things generally centre around a happy, safe home. And we know that people prefer to spend their lives at home and live independent lives for as long as possible and wherever possible. And when it is not possible, to live at home with care and support wrapped around them. Now, looking at this another way, housing options, which is finding people suitable properties, is a district and borough council matter. Planning equally is a very long-term and a district and borough council matter. But adult social care is a county matter. And so coming up with a policy that navigates across the 8 districts and boroughs, which has been delivered through the Staffordshire Leaders Board and the Working Group on Health Priorities, is a really major achievement. Planning for the housing that we need going forwards with care is a matter that goes over decades. And equally, I note the recommendation for creating lifetime homes, and also the recommendation to have energy efficient homes. And I actually believe we should have homes that are all carbon neutral once they're built. It seems completely illogical not to do that. But I think to have homes that last a lifetime but also are energy efficient across a lifetime makes absolute sense. So this strategy pulls together all of those various disparate elements, whether it's about building the housing, making sure they're sustainable, but then providing the care that goes with that for those people who need the care, is where the strategy is trying to get to. It links not just older people, but also those people with a learning disability. The strategy document itself celebrates what is already going on and is being delivered with partners. And I would like just to thank all of our partners for all that they do in providing that accommodation to be able to wrap the care around it. There's lots of detail within the strategy which hopefully encourages providers to incorporate those numbers into their plans for the future. We've referenced a couple of times today the massive growth in the older population within not just this county, but across much of the country. And I hope, because planning is such a long-term affair, that people, providers, will look at these numbers and say, let's start planning what that means for our communities, so that people can live in the communities that they've been brought up in and want to remain in for the rest of their lives. There is within this strategy document lots of resident input and feedback. You know, we wanted to hear the voices of our residents and also to ensure that we heard the voices of their carers and their families, and take that into account within the strategy document itself. And finally, within the strategy, you'll see that we've laid out our priorities. Our priorities for prevention, for stimulating demand, to ensure that there is good information and streamlined access, and that we can provide good quality care and support for some of our most vulnerable people within Staffordshire. So the final thing that this document does is, if this is approved at the Cabinet this morning, which I certainly hope colleagues will support me with, is it outlines the direction of travel for our commissioning intentions. Because it's fine having a strategy which is either in the bottom drawer or wedged under the leg of a desk, but it's really important to make this come alive. We need to make sure that we deliver these elements of the strategy if it's approved, and we set out the direction of travel that we intend to go along. Finally, given the Christmas theme that I started on, I would just like to thank all colleagues, whether that's staff, providers, the voluntary sector, the NHS, anyone within health and care, for their endeavours not just this year, but also over the period when some people will be away from their families and will be working supporting those people who are vulnerable. I'd also especially like to thank all those people who are working to prepare the County Council for the CQC assessment, which takes place early in 2025. The recommendations are noted on page 65.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purton. I think it's a brave man who attempts to introduce a Christmas theme to a 50-page report on housing policy. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Parry.
Yeah, I think, you know, the Christmas message isn't lost in this report, is it? This is very much about those people who don't have that accommodation with care at Christmas, who may well be on a sofa somewhere, in a shop doorway somewhere, or whatever, if in the extremes of this. I was interested in the gap, in a sense, and the report does go into talking about the kind of capacity that we've got in the county and potentially some of the gaps that we've got, which is, it seems in terms of raw numbers, not many, but in fact, I imagine in terms of the true demand, that's quite significant. What the report doesn't really tell me is, if money was no object, what would it take to fix that, to actually provide that capacity? Because the report, and Councillor Pert mentioned that this informs commissioning intentions. What does that actually mean? It means, I guess, that when you are working with partners or other organisations in terms of what you want to deliver, that this informs it. But who does it? Who delivers it? Who builds it? Who provides it? Who's managing how this gap gets filled and how those things get delivered and how those people get swept up and provided with suitable accommodation? the number in terms of mental health needs, I noticed, would seem relatively small. And I don't know, anecdotally, it strikes me that that's an interesting and growing area of need and want. When one sees, you know, or experiences or knows about the issues that people with mental health needs struggle to find suitable care and accommodation. So I'm sorry that's kind of meandering kind of question, but the gist of it is, how do we close that gap? What's it going to take? What's it going to cost? Who's going to do it? And over what timescale? I'm sorry, that's a really tough question for a Christmas meeting, isn't it?
Councillor Pert, do you have an answer?
Councillor Parry, the present that keeps giving. I think you're right about the gap, but we should celebrate actually that the gap is so small, because actually there is good progress being made on all fronts, and I think the details in the report are really helpful. Equally, if we're asking the market, and I'll talk about who the market is in a minute, if we're asking the market to commit for the long term, actually being able to provide the numbers so that people are investing in provision, I think is really good. I think the other point we should make is that people's needs are increasingly complex. We can often use medicine to prolong the quality of people's lives, or sometimes it is just prolonging people's lives. But also that often means that they live with greater complexity for longer. And so as a result, you know, there is a whole range of different requirements for providing support. In terms of directly answering your question, who is going to meet that need? You know, there's a range of private providers. There is, you know, whether that is, and this strategy relates particularly to homes. So it's more like home care rather than, it's not focused on residential and nursing homes. So there are a range of home care providers. There are a range of people setting aside residential villages, extra care facilities, and you've got private providers, housing associations coming into this space. You've got a whole range of different people. But if we don't identify what the gap is, which is what this strategy looks at doing, why would an organisation come and invest in those services for our residents? I think the other thing which is really important, and the County Council does this in the background that no one sees unless you're aware of it, we have a care home team who will work to improve the quality of all of the provision within these markets. And that is by working alongside of our providers, putting an arm around their shoulder and helping support them with a range of different alternatives to ensure that our care homes and our provision for support is as good as it can be within the County Council. Your point about mental health is really right, and we have a very good quality partner within Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust, who do a huge amount of work within mental health and early diagnosis and early identification, and particularly are investing in their community-based facilities so that actually people can be supported. And I think that the number I saw with them the other week was 25% of people will experience a mental health, poor mental health at some stage in their lives. And so as a result, within Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust, they are working to upstream their prevention so that it can be done within the community, because people, and the fundamentals of this report is people want to be at home for as long as possible, you know, in their familiar surroundings with family and friends close by. And this report is setting out a strategy to be able to go and do that long term.
Thank you, Councillor Pert. I have no one else indicating. Councillor Pert, would you like to read the recommendations?
So the recommendations are to approve the Housing with Care Strategy 2024 to 2029, and secondly, to note the intention to include expectations for new development to adopt lifetime home standards to meet changing needs of residents and to contribute to climate change objectives.
Thank you, Councillor Pert. Colleagues, you've heard the recommendations. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 9, Customer Experience Strategy. I'll go straight over to you, Councillor Parry.
You're going to do a preamble for me.
Keep you on your toes.
So, yeah, this is about our new customer experience strategy, because we haven't had one up to now. And I've got to say, colleagues, it took me a while to get my head around this, because I struggle with customer, and the report describes that, you know, that most of the people, I guess, we deal with don't necessarily consider themselves a customer. The report itself says the term customer sometimes feel a little unnatural in a local authority context. Our residents don't have a choice. They can't choose to shop at another council that a customer might have in a commercial concern. Instead, they take the service that we provide from the council. But that doesn't mean we can just, if you like, take it or leave it. This is not Ryanair. But this makes it even more important, therefore, to get our approach right, we think. Because we know people don't necessarily have a choice, that means actually our interaction and our relationship with whether you consider yourself a customer or a service user or just a resident, it matters. It matters how we interact. And clearly, you know, things move on, don't they, in terms of technology, so the channels into the council change. It's much more perhaps online, etc., or often through members, you know, as the sort of access point to this council is often through councillors. And, you know, very often it's almost a point of some stress as well. You know, people are not checking the balance. People are ringing because they've got an issue, or they've got to resolve something, or they need help, or whatever. So that kind of moment of truth, that point at which we meet, you know, the user or the customer, and the provider, us, the many parts of this council, have to be considered. And how that sort of that kind of point, that moment of truth is handled, because it's different in different parts of the council. You know, that interaction you may have in children's services where you're trying to get something fixed for your child, you know, school related or whatever, to if you're trying to get adequate placement for your elderly relative to get a resi placement or home help, to I want this pothole fixed. You know, they are not the same. There's lots of different points of contact within this council. So we're not looking for a kind of uniform, this is the kind of standard of, you know, the way you deal with people when they make contact with the council. This is trying to engender a culture, a process, or a way to approach these things across the organisation, not in a uniform, bog-standard way, but actually making our organisation aware of our duty to treat people with respect, to treat people courteously, which we do, I know, in 99.999% of the time, but to ensure that we can do that with going that kind of extra step sometimes to try and help people. So there's a real kind of need to, I think, bring that together. So what the team have done is they've gone and listened, they've gone and explored, they've gone and researched, they've brought in some expertise, so we're not doing this on our own, in our own little bubble. They've kind of benchmarked to see, you know, where we stand as an organisation. Does that feel about right? Where are the areas of improvement? How can we improve? How do we support the organisation and individuals in the organisation who are at that point of contact to ensure that we're doing everything we can as an organisation to give good service in that sense, and to make sure that we are we are, again, as much as possible, best in class in what we do. So there are three main objectives to this in terms of trying to achieve that excellence approach. One is around Pillar A, which is about our leadership, and there's 5 objectives in terms of what we would like to meet in terms of our leadership of this. The second pillar with 5 key objectives is around our people and how we support our people to be able to deliver this. And then finally is how we do it, the delivery, and there's a set of objectives in terms of how we deliver that. So this is measurable, this is objective. We can come back and we can study this at some point in the future to say, well, how are we doing then? How's this working? And we're developing that kind of promise, if you like, which most organisations like to do, in terms of what we understand our customers expect and how do we meet up to those expectations. So that's a strategy. There's a glossy that goes with it with a lovely picture of me inside, just so you know. Happy to take questions, Deputy Leader, or move to recommendations at your wish.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry. Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I welcome this new strategy. I think most people come into contact with the County Council probably in 2 ways. One, when they receive the council tax bill, and there's a nice picture of the leader saying this is all the services we obviously provide, but also when something is an issue for them, like a pothole or a tree or something like that. So I think I'm interested in the digital innovation part of the strategy. I think there's really strides we can make as technology increases to make the residents' customers' journey better. And I think we're already looking at that through the innovation, digital innovation work that you're doing and officers are doing. And look to see that coming to fruition. I think it's in the mode of customer services out to people that are reporting things to us that can take a lot of the problems we have experienced in the past through phone lines and online clunky methods out of the way, and use things such as AI and other things to help us to get an answer to the resident. It may not be that pothole can be filled straight away or that tree is going to be sorted tomorrow, but at least it's a regular update that it's been looked at. It's been obviously an issue which the County Council is looking at in the highways perspective. So I really think that is good in the strategy. I would say there's a lot of it, that sort of people-to-people actions that the County Council has. They're very good at that, I think, and already. And I think I'm good to see in the strategy looking to refine that. I think when people come into contact, whether it's the elderly or the young, or through our community works and outreach, our country parks and the staff, the County Council staff are respected and also know their job, inside out, and can help residents to achieve what they want to achieve, get their problems sorted, or just be looked after by the County Council. We shouldn't also neglect that as a thing we're doing already. I think the strategy helps us to bring all that together and be even better at that.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Councillor DeVille.
Thank you, Chairman. Agree totally with Councillor Tagg's comments, Chairman. I'm really, really pleased we're looking at this. I think the strategy, it'll evolve, it'll grow, won't it, and evolve as time moves on. I see on page 122, related to our key objectives. They're spot on, aren't they, and putting the customer really at the front of all our future thinking. And of course, as we well know, colleagues, a company very close to our hearts over in Roaster, base virtually everything they do on customer care, on care to the customer. So I'm delighted to see this this strategy. I did see, Deputy Leader, at our last visit to JCB, a sign on the wall, very prominent sign on the wall, from Lord Bamford, saying, if it's important to our customers, it's important to us. And I'm delighted that Councillor Parry's report really takes the same tone, that we focus totally on our customer requirements. An excellent report, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor DeVille. As there are no more speakers, I'll just add a few comments of my own. I think this is an incredibly welcome step. Understandably, perhaps, given the burden of responsibilities that we have as a council, like all other councils, I think our focus for many years has been very much on delivery, so delivery of those services that our residents need. And you could write a report many times this length on the right word to describe how we what word we want to use for those people who use our services. But if they are customers, then they're certainly necessary purchases that they have from us, aren't they? There aren't many things that people come to us for that they don't feel that they need. But in focusing on delivering those services, we have perhaps not been as good at communicating, and that two-way communication, being seen to be listening to our residents whilst we are in the process of delivering the solutions they need. So it's really welcome to see this focus on this. And I think although the needs in different service areas will be different, the culture, clearly the aspiration in this report is that the culture across all of our services will be the same in terms of how people should expect to be treated if they contact Staffordshire County Council about something that they need to talk to us about. So an incredibly welcome report. Thank you very much for bringing it today. And now back to you, Councillor Parry, to read the recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy. I therefore recommend that Cabinet note the learnings from the engagement and how this has shaped the development of the strategy, approve the strategy and its implementation, and delegate authority to the Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Corporate Services to approve the Customer Experience Delivery Plan for implementation and delivery, approve the schedule and approach for performance monitoring and launch of the strategy, including with a further customer and employee survey each year, with further detail to be brought back to scrutiny and Cabinet on an annual basis or each year. I move.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Colleagues, you've heard the recommendations. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to the forward plan of key decisions. Now, the leader likes to read all of these out, so I will follow suit, even though one or two of my colleagues are shaking their heads, just to see if I can do it, colleagues. So I'll do it quickly. So in our next meeting on the 15th of January 2025, we have the recommissioning of supported living care services brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Health and Care, Councillor Pert. At the same meeting, we have Modern Methods of Construction Framework Agreement, an exciting report brought to us by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry. We do miss the days when Councillor DeVille brought those to us. The most exciting report in that meeting, the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent Joint Economic Strategy, brought to you by me. The commissioning of care home placements, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Health and Care, Councillor Pert. In private, we have the sale of surplus land at Hoon Avenue, Newcastle under Lyme, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry. Also in private, we have supporting families post-March 2025, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, Councillor Sutton. In what will be a pretty long meeting, I think, we also have our unregulated placement update, brought to you by Councillor Sutton, and our Entrust Service Delivery Agreement Review, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry. Moving on to the 29th of January, we have a single agenda item meeting to agree our medium-term financial strategy 2025 to 2030, which we brought to you by the Leader of the Council, Councillor White, and the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry. Moving on into February, we have the Integrated Performance Report Quarter 3 for 24-25 financial year, brought to you by the Leader of the Council, Councillor White. The Capital Programme for Schools 25-26, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Education and Send, Councillor Price. And then moving on to the March meeting, we have the Climate Action Plan Revision, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Change, Councillor Tagg. The very eagerly awaited Highways Transport Capital Programme, 25-26, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Strategic Highways, Councillor DeVille. And the Contract Award of Local Authority Social Care Case Management Systems, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, Councillor Sutton, and the Cabinet Member for Health and Care, Councillor Pert. And then finally, colleagues will be pleased to hear in our April meeting, we have the Integrated Performance Report Quarter 4, brought to you by the Leader of the Council, Councillor White, Data and Insight Strategy, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry, and the Leader of the Council, Councillor White. And very finally, unregulated placement update brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, Councillor Sutton. So plenty for us to do in the new year, colleagues. At this point, were there any items to be held in private? I would move the exclusion of the public, but there are not. So it only remains for me to wish all colleagues within the council and all the good people of Staffordshire a very happy Christmas. Do enjoy the break when we get to it, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the new year.